Today I'm going to be revisiting the very first watercolors that I ever used. This is the paint that really started my love of the medium. This 8-color Prang watercolor palette was a required purchase for my grade 9 art class, and it was really life-changing. All I wanted to draw back then was anime and manga characters, but I couldn't afford the Copic markers that most of the artists were using. So when I got my hands on this palette, it ended up being completely used up because now I had a good way of coloring my sparkly-eyed, spiky-haired creations. I repurchased these paints from Amazon for $12.99, and I remember that this set was about $10 all the way back in 2003, so that's probably not too far off when you factor in inflation. It's nice to know that some things don't change, and as I dip into the colors to swatch and to make a mixing chart, I don't think the formula has changed much either. The black in this palette isn't very transparent, but I remember that I really liked that when I first used it, because I would use it to line my paintings and cover up any mistakes I made. The pans are semi-moist, something that I really do prefer, since many budget or beginner watercolor pan sets tend to be dry and chalky. There is a bit of a sheen on the dry paint, especially if you don't dilute it with enough water. This set comes with a paintbrush, and it's not that bad, though it does tend to shed a bit. It has a decent point, though. I recommend investing in a better, more versatile brush. You really can't go wrong with something like a synthetic round No. 8 watercolor brush. The colors in this set are bright and nicely pigmented. There are only 8 pans, but sometimes it's nice to work simply. It's a student grade set, so I doubt the colors will be very light fast, which means that if you hang up a painting made with these, it's likely to fade over time. There's no granulation, though the colors behave like watercolors and bloom out a bit when hit with water. They mix well together. Though there is no white, you can always get yourself a bottle of Chinese white for a more pastel color. That's what I'm doing, and I'm using Holbein Artist watercolor tubes. I wanted to paint something that represented the time period when I first got these watercolors. I wanted to paint something that I would have drawn back then. Something about the colors as I was swatching them really screamed Yu-Gi-Oh to me. I think it's the purple. Did anyone else think that Yami Yugi was a hunk? He had a really magnificent head of hair. Though if I was being really true to my art style of the time, he would be winking and his hands would be behind his back. I don't always follow the watercolor rule of light to dark because I don't usually have much of a plan for my painting sessions, but I figured that it would be fair to work that way today since I don't want to make the colors overly muddy, to give them a fair chance. I'm also using some decent paper, fluid cold press 140 pounds, since I find that good paper can save bad paints, but good paint is just wasted on crappy paper. Though back in high school, I just painted directly into my sketchbook and squash down the crinkled, buckled pages with textbook overnight. Though if you don't do washes and just use the paints more opaquely to color in your sketches, kind of like a gouache, the paper won't buckle as much. I find that this paint lifts quite easily off the paper, but it does tend to leave behind a stain. Usually that's a problem in dye-based versus pigment-based watercolors, but according to the company, this paint is pigment-based with no wax fillers. This means that your mistakes will be harder to fix, but since the paint layers pretty well, you might be able to cover it up, and the black can cover up anything. You can really see how the paint behaves in the bigger background areas that I'm working on. It's really not bad. You kind of have to encourage it to spread, but that just means that you're more in control of where the paint goes around the page, which is great if you're not used to painting in watercolor, though I really prefer the unpredictability. I'm just using the brush that came with the palette to add some black eyeliner details, and as long as you take away the excess water, it makes a nice line, comparable to inking with a brush pen. Back in grade 9, I didn't have any kind of liner, and when I wanted to make a darker line than pencil, I really liked to use this to go over my paintings to kind of fix up anything that looked a little strange. For the price, I think that these watercolors are the best set for a beginner. They're even great if you want a cheap set of paint to take with you on an art adventure or to play around in your sketchbook, especially if you don't want to risk losing or damaging your better supplies. It's great for practicing mixing, and you can use the colors with more or less water, depending on how transparent of an effect you want to have. As I mentioned earlier, some of those dried colors, especially the black, will have a bit of a sheen to it, but it's easy enough to avoid with water dilution. The colors are quite vibrant, and I was able to mix what I needed pretty easily, though I did have to add my own Chinese white. This set feels really good to paint with, and I'm quite happy with the results. It's a pretty great value for the price, and like I said before, probably the best set for beginners.